and welcome back to my channel. This is Marla and I'm so glad you're joining me today for another Scrappy Tails Crafts video. Today I'm featuring the Retro Birthday Blooms die set, which is a large die set full of beautiful flowers, butterflies, and a happy birthday sentiment. I'll be using some distress inks. There are the yellows that I'll be using, and then I'll be using some corally reds. I'm going to start with worn lipstick, and I have a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. My worn lipstick is starting to get a little bit dry. I do need to get a re-inker for this. Of course, the mini ink cubes don't last quite as long as the full ink pads, but I'm able to manage to get this color down. I will go back over it a second time. My next color is going to be the beautiful Abandoned Coral. I'm going in different sections on the cardstock because I want to have a variety of options to choose from. Not all flowers are going to have identical petals. Sometimes you're going to have a different shade or variation in the color. And so by taking similar colors from the Distress ink line and blending it onto this cardstock, it's going to give me a lot of options when I'm doing my die cutting. I'll go over some of these sections just a little bit more, as I mentioned, and then I'm going to flip the panel around and I'll work on the other end with my yellows. I'm going to start with the scattered straw is what I start with, but I end up going over it with the fossilized amber. So here I'm starting with the scattered straw. I'll add a little bit of the mustard seed, and then I don't know what I was thinking, but for some reason I went over that scattered straw with my fossilized amber. Again, I'm looking for different color variations. I originally thought that the centers of my flowers were going to be these yellow colors, and I wanted different options again to choose from with my dies. But as you're going to see when I start putting my flowers together, I do end up going with a green instead of the yellow, but I will use this yellow for the butterfly. So I'm going to, I realized that I went over that scattered straw, so I'm just adding a little bit more scattered straw. Here I went over to my sink. I did not use my sprayer. I went to my sink. I had some running water, and I heavily wet my hands and just went to town splattering that panel. There's a look at the retro flowers. Such a 70s vibe, don't you think? I'm going to begin with my first flower and start with the largest of the blooms, and so I'm going to put that in the lower right hand corner. So my bottom layer is actually going to be my lightest layer, and then I'll add the medium sized flower layer and the small one. Now there is an inside piece and an outside piece. You can die cut the outside and then choose to use the inside piece to make it another color. I wanted tone on tone, and so I went back and just inlaid anything back in that didn't come out of the die. So you can see there's the two layers of the flower, and then this is the bottom layer. So you can see with that heavy ink splattering that I am getting a lot of interest on those flowers. Here I left this in. As I mentioned, I originally thought that I was going to use yellow centers, and I will show you what that looks like. And there are 3 pieces that you can use for the center of the flower, and I chose just to use 2. So there's what it would look like with the yellow. I ink blended 2 more panels, one with picked raspberry, abandoned coral, and festive berries, and then I did peeled paint and shabby shutters. So here I just am doing 2 layers of the die cut. I'm using this medium layer and then the smaller layer. And then there I used the green to cut out the centers, and I really like that color combination much better. So I went ahead and cut it 2 more times so that I can have the centers in the green for all 3 of my flowers, and I just think that that green really makes those flowers pop. I think that touch of green just really changes the mood of this project. So here's where I decided to go ahead and use the butterfly in the yellow. I laid the detailed piece on the mustard seed, and then I used the outline, which is going to be the darkest color, on the fossilized amber. I'm going to just glue the center of that detailed layer of the butterfly onto the solid layer, and then there is a third piece, which is the body of the butterfly, and I cut that out of the green cardstock. Moving on to the sentiment that is included, this beautiful happy birthday. I cut it out 3 times, 2 from some scrap cardstock, and then the third time I had a beautiful green that I thought went really well with the centers of the flowers, and so I am going to use that as the top layer, and layering all these together with that liquid glue is going to give me that nice sturdy chipboard sentiment that I like. My fine glue tip, I'm in our other home in South Dakota for the summer. This is where my grandkids are up here, and so I'm spending the summer with them. So I keep craft supplies in both of my houses, and this glue bottle, the fine tip, the little pin that goes in it, adhered to it over the winter, and so I can't get it out. So I have to get a new fine tip, which is why I'm struggling with this bottle. I had to remove the fine tip, and I'm using the regular tip that is on there. So it comes out just a little bit thicker, and the bottle's almost empty, so I just guess I have to get a new bottle, don't I? So I went ahead and layered up the tittle for my sentiment, and now I'm going to start assembling my flowers. I'll start with the centers. I'll put all of those together, the 2 layers, and then I will add those to the smallest flower on each of the layers. So I have 2 small flowers which have the medium and the small flower, and then I have 1 large flower which has the 3 layers, so it's going to have the large, medium, and small. I'm adding a piece of foam tape between each of the layers. These little foam squares are nice and handy. And I'm offsetting the petals. And see, these come together beautifully. These are thin dimensions, so they're not quite as thick as some of the other ones. But it just adds a little bit more interest to the flower and gives it that little lift that I always like. I'm just a dimensional girl. I really love foam tape. I think that it was the best thing that somebody brought into card making. If there was one thing that I would hate to give up, I think it would be foam tape. All right, so now we need to do our background. I have this stencil from my stash, and I have some spun sugar distress ink. I thought I wanted to do just a really nice faint background that would just create a little bit of interest, but kind of still keep that clean and simple look. But once I laid my flowers against it, you really didn't notice it at all, and spun sugar is such a light pink color that I decided that I was going to go ahead and figure out which way the stencil needed to go, align it back up, and then I'm just going to darken that color a little bit more because I think that it was just getting lost, and quite honestly, if I didn't make it darker, why would I even bother putting it on that background, because you really wouldn't see it. So here I'm just adding that little bit of ink there. I think it's a little bit more prominent and I like that better. I'll start placing things where I think they need to go. I am going to misplace this large flower. I don't give myself enough room for the sentiment, and so I am going to have to strategically lift this back up. I don't know what I was thinking when I was putting it down, but I did put it down a little bit too low. You'll see it right here. See, I don't know why I didn't put it up where the other flowers are. Hindsight's 2020, isn't it? But, you know, no harm, no foul. I was able to lift it up and salvage the card. So I always like to do odd numbers. These flowers fit beautifully in a cluster of 3 onto this A2 top folding card panel. And this is Nina, or no, it's not Nina. It's actually Paper Tray Ink white cardstock. I think theirs is 110 pounds. So here I'm just going to use my reverse tweezers in just a moment and try to, or not my reverse tweezers, but a pair of tweezers, and just lift this up very carefully. There was no damage to the flower. And I'll add a little bit more of that glue. You'll notice that I'm adding it to all areas of the petal, and that is because it does have that inlay and I don't want it to come out or the card to come apart, those pieces to come apart when the recipient gets the card. I'm going to add some foam squares. So you saw I used those small squares, and I just cut some of them in half to put them behind part of the happy birthday. The H and the A, and I think one of the P's maybe, is laying on the flower, so it automatically is going to have a little bit of lift to make sure that that sentiment was stable on the card. I did need to add a little bit of that foam tape. Of course, I got it crooked the first time and a couple of those pieces came off, so I'm just going to turn it back around, add those 2 pieces of foam tape, and then I'm going to straighten that out. If you haven't checked out the Scrappy Tails Crafts release, I will have a link in the description box below. My last video will be linked at the end of this one. It was a beautiful card for the book lover in your life. I'm a sucker for flowers, so of course these retro flowers kind of make my heart go pitter patter, and I really love the color combination on this card. I'm going to add my little tittle once I get my butterfly adhered, and when I finish with that, that will complete my card. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to hear what you think of these retro flowers. Until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for joining me.